the most salient feature of the environment that shapes the circuits of the human brain is actually the relationship with the parents. And if the parents are present and emotionally attuned and available, the child brains develop properly. But the parents are stressed, the child absorbs the stress. What can they do with it? They tune out. And that tuning out thing is programmed into the brain. And then 10 years later or 50 years later, we say, you got this disease. No, you don't. You've got a coping mechanism.
Welcome to the Mindset by Design podcast with your host and NLP expert, Andy Murphy, where you will learn the tips, tricks, and strategies he teaches his world-class clients to give you the skills to dominate any business.
What's going on, Mindset by Design crew, and welcome to episode 385. Hope you're amazing as always. I really do. Did you miss the clip show last week? Yeah, I didn't do a clip show. It was a bit of traveling, again, working my ass off to get everything launched. And we are there. We are there. It's the Unfair Advantage Academy is ready to go. If you want to double your closing percentage in 180 days and you are in real estate, insurance, sales, or you're any type of entrepreneur, then you're going to want to be in a part of this. 180 days to double your closing percentage and double your income. Man, you got to be in this. You know what I mean? So head over to unfairadvantage.online or head to the show notes or just find me on social media. That's it. That's it. That's all I'm pitching. You know if it's for you or not. You know if it's for you or not. You know if NLP, neuroscience, biohacking, and my 20 years of working with the best in the world is for you. Hey, that's all up to you. Today's episode, I really like. Do you know what? The amount of entrepreneurs and salespeople that have come to me over the years, and remember, this is a lot of people. And the amount of people that have come to me and said, you know, I've got ADHD, I've got ADD. And I've been able to have, man, through nootropics, through what I do and everything else, and the systems, the techniques, understanding brainwave control, state control, and tuning their nervous system in, what I've been able to do so many times is, well, yeah, people come off their meds. I've not told them to come off the meds. They felt like they've wanted to come off the meds, and guess what's happened? They've been in complete control of themselves. And that's not me being a genius. Hey, I'm just saying, you know. What it's really being is resetting them, giving them tools, skills, but reprogramming their brain to respond better, reprogramming their nervous system to respond better. But I put that clip at the very, very start for a reason, right? Now, that is really the juice of this episode. If you understood what that first clip really meant, then everything would change in your life in general, but people's life in general. And also, this episode would make sense already to you. It's quite wild, man, when I delve deep into people to create high performance, everything always comes back to trauma. In one way or another, whatever your definition of is, right? The trauma doesn't have to be that you've been in a horrific car accident and you got your legs chopped off and someone did something creepy to you. Doesn't mean that, right? Doesn't mean it's not either. But what it really means is we all have trauma, and we actually can have micro trauma. Micro trauma can actually build up to like 300 micro traumas or pinpricks in your nervous system. That what they do is, they constantly getting triggered, right? So when we can start to understand that, and some people like myself have severe trauma from a childhood. So when you start to understand that, then we can go and start to heal that, delete that, change the perspective, change the neurochemical association with that memory, right? And so then once we can change that, then I build that into the future in a performance way. So now that we're not getting triggered by something that is creating a negative response, what I'm doing then is building the neurology or the neural pathways or your brain's software or your mind muscle, whatever the hell you want to call it, man. But then we can start building it forwards and we start connecting it with money, your next deal, motivation, right? Scaling your business, closing, whatever the heck it is, man. That's what we do. But it all comes to really being aware of what you're being triggered and how you're reacting. And what I love about this episode is this is a physician that was on Rogan, and he wrote the famous book around ADD and ADHD, Gabor Mate. And do you know what? It's wild. This whole thing's wild. Anyway, he got diagnosed with, he's a physician, obviously, got diagnosed, he self-diagnosed himself. Then he got diagnosed with ADHD when he was 50 years old. And then he went down the chemical route and then came back to truly understand what this is all about. And it's wild to me that after seeing so many people and looking into so many brains, there's always trauma. Do you know what I mean? There's always trauma. And trauma could be you not wanting to open an office or expand your business because of something that happened with a business partner in the past. I see that all the time, by the way, all the time. Or the trauma could be that you sabotage money patterns because of where you came from in your environment, your neighborhood, the people that you were around, your family, and that creates trauma around specific things like money or holding money or growing money or deserving money. And when you can really understand that, that's not just normal coaching. Do you know what I mean? It needs a level of sophistication, wisdom, and high-level techniques to be able to design, delete, and install this level of performance and what you truly need to hit that next level. You know what I mean? And that just comes from me doing this 20 years and being fucked up myself and healing myself and going on this wild journey with thousands of people and looking in the minds of the best in the world, and then realizing, man, we're all just human. We're all just human doing our best. But if we can put tools in your hands, if we can give you this stuff, then your career just accelerates to a whole new level. You know what I mean? And we can do this really, really fast. Really, really fast. So that's what today's episode's about. It's like the guy hasn't got the most, he's got a doctor's voice. Let's say that, man, you know? He's got a doctor's voice. But he's brilliant, obviously. And Joe, obviously, of course, asks some intriguing questions and relates it back to him. And what am I going to do? Yeah, I'm going to jump in and give you my 2 cents worth. $2 worth, $2 million worth. I don't know, you can decide. But I'm going to have a chat about it. And that's it. Let's jump into this episode. Let's jump in. And I just want to make sure that, if you are in real estate, sales of any kind, insurance sales, if you are an entrepreneur doing sales, if you're a coach, whatever it is, and you want to double your closing percentage, your income in the next 180 days, then unfairadvantage.online, or go to the show notes, or come and find me on social media somewhere. Easy. Okay, speaking of easy, I will see you at the end of the show.
I was just watching this very disturbing commercial yesterday with children, and it was talking about ADHD, and it showed a kid that was not paying attention in class, and it showed these kids like playing around and doing things they weren't supposed to be doing.
Yes.
And then they introduced this medication. And then you have the child raising their hand, and then you have everyone clapping, and you have the child with a big smile on their face, and you've medicated your child to be a successful and integrated person in society.
Shall I spot off about ADHD for a minute?
Yes, please.
That was my first book on ADHD. It's the American Scattered Minds, depending on which edition you get. And that was after I was diagnosed with it myself in my 50s.
What does it mean?
ADHD?
Yeah, what is it exactly? Is it real?
Oh, it's real.
But what does it mean?
Well,
Like if someone has ADHD, it's not like you have herpes, right? Like you could say, "Oh, you got a disease."
well,
What is it?
well, that's the whole point, is that the medical profession and a lot of the so-called experts think about it as a disease, another one of these inherited diseases. In fact, they say it's the most heritable mental illness there is. And I say it's neither an illness nor is it heritable. So the hallmark are difficulty paying attention when you're not motivated.
Yeah.
So kind of tuning out, like that kid in the commercial.
Like me.
Okay. Poor impulse control, so that you tend to act out whatever emotion arises.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the hyperactivity, difficulty sitting still and then to fidget and all that. And that described me to a T. But as soon as I learned about the diagnosis, I knew something. This is not a disease, and it's not heritable, despite the fact that some of my kids were diagnosed with it. What is it? So tuning out is not a disease. So let me ask you a question, if I may.
Okay.
If I were to stress you right now, create stress, emotional difficulty or tension for you right now, what would be your options of dealing with that, of dealing with me? What would be your options?
I could either get upset or I could leave.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You could fight back, flight or fight, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
But what if you didn't have those options?
Yeah. Then you're stuck.
And now what does the brain do when you're stuck like that?
It gets distracted.
It gets tunes out.
Yeah, it tunes out. You want to do other things, think about other things.
In other words, it's a coping mechanism.
Yeah. It's
No.
normal. I mean, the idea that your child who is, an 8-9-year-old ball of energy filled with, hormones and life and thoughts and things they enjoy, and then you make them sit down all day in this unnatural state in a classroom with fluorescent lights and stare at a teacher that's unmotivated and underpaid and is teaching something in a very boring and non-entertaining way.
Yeah.
And that if this kid doesn't lock in like a zombie, we need to medicate.
Okay, crew, let me jump in there. I actually let it go a little bit longer than I was going to. I was going to jump in a bit earlier. But think about that. I know when I was at school, it was a case of I was really bored. I was really bored. I didn't have ADHD. I was just really bored. The only thing I wanted to do was martial arts. I just wanted to train. So I used to be really excited about the end of the day so I could go home and train, right? That was all I cared about. But you know what never gets asked in school? What do you like? What do you enjoy? What has somebody told you that you're good at? What do you think you're good at? What do you want to do? And then we look into different learning modalities, right? People they need to know the why, right? Were you ever told in school why you were learning the subject? Probably not, right? Do you need it because in a year's time you're going to take an exam? Yeah, well, who gives a shit about an exam, right? What's the exam for? Well, if you get this exam, it leads to this, and potentially we can set you up in this career. Oh, okay, at least that makes a little bit more sense. But still, I don't really care. So we can have auditory, we can have kinesthetic learning modalities, right? We have to physically do stuff. We auditory, meaning we have to hear it. Visual, we have to see it, right? There's all of these different ways that we actually learn. And then if we don't hit those modalities because the teacher isn't training it that way, then we're classed as unintelligent, bored, or a bad student. But the truth is, it's the same with everything that we do in life. When you're an adult, it's cool because you can do what you want. It's your choice, isn't it, You can do whatever you want. You can watch whatever you want. You can think whatever you want. You can be around whoever you want. You can try an entrepreneurial endeavor if you want to. You can become a salesperson if you want to. You can do whatever you want. And because of that, when we look back, often what happens is, as adults, if we're not careful, we keep doing the same pattern that is entrained into us when we are young, right? So the schooling system in that context, right, makes us very dull, which makes us then become a brainwashed adult. But the truth is, you can do whatever you want. Absolutely whatever you want. And so what they're talking about there is, with ADHD meds, right? They definitely work for some people, and you'll learn more in a moment about Gabor and what his experience going through these meds. But at the end of the day, if we start pumping people with medication, I'm not saying it's not a good temporary fix. Sometimes it really is. But then what, right? We're gonna just become a zombie. There's a reason why somebody is the best athlete in the world. It's because they have these superpowers. You can call them problems. They're obsessive. They're extremely driven, right? They're motivated only in one area of life. But that makes a Michael Jordan. That makes a LeBron James. That makes, whoever, right? Do you understand where I'm going? So if we dull those superpowers, we don't get someone who's brilliant. We don't get an outlier. We don't get someone who stands out from the crowd. We don't get those people. And then it involves trauma, is what he's talking about or about to talk about, right? Trauma. Trauma is an interesting thing. Do you know what I mean? We all have traumas, whether they're micro traumas like we were saying before, or they're or severe traumas. But traumas we all have. So we have to heal from these traumas. And because we have to heal from these traumas, it makes us stronger. It makes us more motivated to go and help and serve more people. It takes us in a different direction. If everything was really nice in life, we'd probably be a very boring person. You know what I mean? If you were born into money, everything was comfy, you had incredible parents, you got everything that you chose and you wanted, there was zero struggle in life, you would be a very boring person, right? You only get a philosopher because they go into things and think. You only get a superstar in something because they're using or healing from trauma in a certain way. Now, we've all got the trauma, but how we use it, we can let it destroy us, or we can let it invigorate us, empower us, right? And I don't mean using it as the darkness to bounce off, although that's what we usually do at the start. I mean using it as fuel to go and then become a better version of us. Does that make sense? So we dumb that down. What we're doing with people is we're taking away that power. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, the other part of it is that if you look at my infancy, and it sounds like yours, we spent our first year or two under very difficult circumstances, a lot of stress. Infants can't help but absorb the stress of their parents.
Right.
They can't help it. What does an infant do? Could I have escaped or fought back? Could you have? All we could do is tune out.
Yes.
But when is this tuning out happening? When our brain is being developed.
Right.
And our brain, this is the part that nobody taught me in medical school, but it turns out that brain science now teaches us that the human brain develops under the impact of the environment. So the most salient feature of the environment that shapes the circuits of the human brain is actually the relationship with the parents. And if the parents are present and emotionally attuned and available, the child brains develop properly. But the parents are stressed, the child absorbs the stress. What can they do with it? They tune out. And that tuning out thing is programmed into the brain. And then 10 years later or 50 years later, we say, you got this disease. No, you don't. You've got a coping mechanism that's no longer working for you. But it had a function when it first came along. So this whole idea, and by the way, if a family comes to me with their ADHD child, I'll say to them, what you've got here is a very sensitive child. That sensitive child is picking up on all the vibes, energies, and stresses in your family. You want to help this child? Deal with the whole family. Look at the parental relationship. Look at how what stress is there in your life. Look at how you react to the child. Look at, do you understand the child's behavior or the emotions that the child is having, or are you just trying to control the child's behaviors? Look at all that. And very often parents will tell me after they've read that book on ADHD is they've totally changed their relationship to their child. The child changes. What a surprise.
Makes sense, right? Cause and effect. Cause and effect. Of course your environment dictates and produces a specific behavior in people. You could take the most happiest, amazing person and you put them in a maximum security, solitary confinement prison, you know? Hey, you might get the odd one to go in here, just meditate for 10 years, but most people in that violent, incredible, intense environment wouldn't thrive, you know? You're probably not going to get better. Some people might, again, those are the outliers. But most people will crumble. You take someone from a happy place and put them in an intense, horrible place, they're probably going to adapt to survive, right? So we can go from Maslow's hierarchy of needs and we can go from enlightened all the way down to primal, right? And that primal side of us gets activated when the environment at home isn't calm, right? It's not calm, it's not happy. And so when we think about it like that, why would it be any different in a business environment? I don't know the culture of your company, whether you're running the company or you're an intrapreneur and you're working for somebody else, and that's okay too, right? But the culture of that environment is going to dictate how you respond. You know, and that's a decision. Your decision to respond could be, I'm going to get better, I'm going to get out of here, I'm going to kick ass, I'm going to be the top performer. I love this militant side of the culture of the company, but you might do the opposite. That militant culture of the company could actually make you not thrive, but die. It could shrink you up, it could hurt you, it could, take away your superpowers, kryptonite stuff, right? But when we start to understand that environments dictate, or they don't dictate, but what they really do is heavily or massively influence how we behave, our beliefs, our attitudes, our language, how we perceive the world, our energy levels, our motivation, our expectations, how we communicate with people. All of that comes from your environment. So if you're running a business right now or you're running a team right now, pay attention, right? Because just like a child, the leader of that team is the parent, whether they understand it or not. It's the truth, right? And the culture of that team or company is like your home. And if your home is full of aggression and chaos, then guess what? Those people, or the kids, are going to not be at their best. But if that company and culture is a place that you really want to be in, you love it, right? You love hanging out there, you love the people there, you're going to more than likely be motivated to be at your best. And what happens if you're at your best? Yeah, that's right. You make more money for everybody, including yourself, and then that ripple effect helps your family. So trauma is an interesting thing, but again, when the default mechanism is to escape, right? There's many ways people escape. They escape through thriving, they escape through dying, yeah, but they can also escape through lifelong sabotage patterns of holding themselves back. Or they could have sabotage pattern of using substances or whatever it is, right? And some substances are all right. You probably know about this on the podcast. You know, I've had Dennis McKenna on here, who's the godfather of psychedelics, and they're showing that to release trauma is incredible. But microdosing actually routes, depending on where you're from, the brain to go around serotonin. So it uses the function in a different way. It's so some drugs are good, if you want to call them drugs. But when we start to understand this, it changes how we perceive our past, our present situation, our working environment, everything.
But you go to most doctors, you got this disease, here's the pill. And by the way, I took those medications and they helped me for a while. So I'm not anti.
When you were in your 50s?
Yeah. I'm not anti-medication.
Which ones did you take?
I took Ritalin, which I can tell you the story.
Sure.
So, one of the hallmarks of ADHD is poor impulse control, right? So I found out about ADHD, and even before I was diagnosed, I took Ritalin. And
why did you take it before you were diagnosed?
Because I'm a doctor and I could, hey? And
so you diagnosed yourself?
Well, they did, and
so you at least assumed that you had that, didn't you?
Yeah, I knew I had it, but not only that, also because I had poor impulse control. I never practiced medicine that way. I mean, if you came to me for any problem, my first impulse would never be to write you a prescription, unless it was obvious that you needed it for an infection or something. I'd sit down with you and talk to you about what's going on here, but not me. Poor impulse regulation. So I went to a colleague of mine, a medical colleague. I said, "Hey, Bev, I think I got ADHD. Can you give me some Ritalin?" So she writes me a prescription. And then I took it in a higher than recommended initial dose. And because, if a little bit is good, then more must be even better. And again, it's not how I practice medicine.
Right.
But when I came to myself, that's a totally different ballgame. So I felt immediately present and calm and grounded and focused. Yeah.
And it's a stimulant.
And I went, well, it calms the ADHD brain. Then I go home and my wife says, "You look stoned."
Because you're calm.
Yeah. Well, because I got this glassy-eyed expression. And within a couple of days, the Ritalin made me very depressed. That's one of its potential side effects. So I did see a psychiatrist. I was formally diagnosed, and they gave me dexedrine. And I took that for a while.
That's an amphetamine, isn't it?
It's an amphetamine. It's another stimulant. And it did help me. I became a much more efficient workaholic. I could do even more. It didn't change any of my emotional issues, but it made me more focused and so on. It helped me write my first book. But I haven't taken them for decades. But because also I know that the brain can change if you treat it right. So the reliance on medications that we have is a real poverty of the spirit, a real poverty of imagination, a poverty of medical education. The average doctor never learns this stuff. The average physician never gets a single lecture on brain development, how the brain develops in interaction with the environment. So when you're seeing, and let alone do they hear about trauma, they don't, hardly at all.
Right.
So when they see an adult with ADHD or depression or addiction, or bipolar conditions, or for that matter, autoimmune illness or anything else, they don't think of trauma. They just think of this disease. And they think that the diagnosis explains everything, but the diagnosis don't explain anything. Because think about it. Let's say Gabor or Joe goes to a doctor and they diagnose with ADHD. Well, what are the hallmarks of ADHD? Well, tuning out, poor impulse regulation, maybe hyperactivity. Why does Gabor have poor impulse control, hyperactivity, and tuning out? Because he's got ADHD. How do we know he's got ADHD? Because he's got poor impulse control and tunes out, and he's hyperactive. Why is he hyperactive, tunes out, have poor impulse control? He's got ADHD. How do we know he's got ADHD? Because, it's circular. It doesn't explain it. It doesn't explain anything. Diagnoses describe things, and that they can be helpful that way, but they don't explain.
Yeah, one of the things that people get treated for and they get diagnosed with is anxiety.
Yeah.
And that one drives me nuts.
Yeah.
It drives me nuts because people pretend that anxiety is a disease.
Yeah. It's not.
And I'm like, my God, the world should make you anxious if you're a sensitive, introspective person. If you're just looking at the world itself and you don't put it in perspective, like it's filled with anxiety. The anxiety it's future problem solving. You're thinking about all the things that can go wrong. You're thinking about your life in a potentially devastating way. And that's not a disease. That's just a way you look at the world. And people getting diagnosed with it.
Well, I won't quite agree with you on that one.
In what way?
I felt anxious at times. The world every day is the same. If I
the world is the same, but the way you look at it is not the same, right?
That's the whole point.
Yeah,
So
that's what I'm saying. So
that's
the world
true,
is giving you anxiety.
No, the world is not giving me anxiety.
Right. You're giving yourself anxiety by
yeah.
looking at the world, right?
And by how I look at the world.
Yes.
Because I can look at the same world one day and feel grounded and connected, and I may have all kinds of concerns about what's happening in the world, but my nervous system won't be on edge. My adrenaline won't be flowing. I won't be anxious.
That's my point, is that it's not a disease.
It isn't a disease.
Right.
So remember I talked about those brain circuits of lust and care and rage and seeking and so on. One of the brain circuits that we have, as described by a very prominent late neuroscientist, Jaak Panksepp, is for panic and grief. Panic and grief are the normal responses of the young human being or the young animal when care isn't available. So when the parents are stressed, distracted, economically or politically, or because of their own unresolved trauma, or whatever's going on in their lives, and they don't respond to the child's distress, they don't pick up the child when they're crying. They make the child be alone when the child is upset. The child's panic circuits get activated, as they should be, because when the child's panic circuits get activated, they cry for help.
Yeah.
So it's necessary for survival. A young animal should feel panic when the adult is unavailable.
I love what he's saying here. I love what he's saying. And the more we understand that anxiety is an interesting thing, right? Everyone gets anxious, Actually, some people kind of don't, but I really believe they're not understanding what the hell is going on. But anxiety is triggered by the unknown of the future, right? So when he's talking about those neural circuitry that being activated when we're in animals, I think he's talking about specifically, but we relate that to humans, then what that means is that when we are in danger or perception or perceived danger, then these neural circuitry gets lit up, which means then we are in panic mode, right? So if that's consistently done as a child, and they've related this right back to the womb. So as we're a fetus and we're developing, our nervous system is then getting lit up, right? So the sympathetic nervous system is getting activated, the neural circuitry is getting connected, and what that means is then you're already building a pattern of behavior around feeling in danger. So then if that continues as your child, and then we had that's a trauma in itself, but then we had lots of more crazy traumas on top of it. What happens, man? You got it. What happens is that becomes a default setting, especially when we're a kid and the brain is exceptionally malleable and it's like a blank slate. And so as this program is getting put on it, especially in the imprint stage of our life, then what happens is that is then a default setting for the future. So as we grow up, we become adults. If this program's still playing, well, this is what we call anxiety, right? But chronic anxiety. And I'm not saying the effect isn't real. I'm not saying that at all, because I suffered with anxiety for many, many, many years. I just thought it was being revved up, amped up, ready to go, man. I didn't even realize it was anxiety. I thought that was the feeling you're supposed to feel. That's what I really thought it was. No one taught me any difference, right? Martial arts background, so it was like you were constantly ready to rock and roll. And when you start to understand this, then we have to be self-aware enough to be able to look at what ourselves in every situation in our life, including business and sales, and look at ourselves and go, oh, that's interesting. I'm having this response. No wonder I keep sabotaging myself, right? Or I keep distracting myself, or I keep getting to the goal line and not quite finishing, or I'm scaling something but it never quite happens, or I'm choosing business partners, the wrong business partners, or the wrong team, or the wrong company. And then I start blaming everyone else around me when really it's always us. It's always us. It's about our growth. It's about us getting better. It's about us becoming more badass than you've ever had before in your life. And then what happens? You got it, man. Then we can improve. And if we're on a constant level of improvement, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we're just getting better. Then part of getting better is becoming self-aware, and it's eliminating or deleting or healing or whatever you want to call it. We could play with submodalities, which in the memories, which is the building blocks of memories, and we can tweak them too. Whatever you want to do, but understand that anxiety we can manage, or we can basically get rid of if we're self-aware, if we build new neural circuitry, if we control our brainwaves and the nervous system, and then we can become a badass.
In a rational world, in a sane world, that child would be responded to. But when children, as in our society, are not responded to in their distress, the panic becomes built into their nervous system, and now you have a lot of anxious people. And that's why more and more kids are being diagnosed. You're right, it's not a disease, it's a response to the environment.
And the thought process of like leaving a child alone when the child's crying, is that to toughen the kid up? Is the thought process that you don't want to encourage this sort of behavior because then they'll do it all the time? And then you'll develop an indulgent child? Like, what is the thought process?
The thought process is that the child's behavior is the problem. And so we have to fix the behavior by controlling it. Now, actually, the opposite is true. Because if you pick up the child when a child has distress, physical or emotional distress, you're teaching the child that the world is safe, and they don't have to be anxious about it, and they can just ask for help. And it doesn't entrench kind of crying manipulative behavior. How it works, Dr. Daniel Siegel, who's a psychiatrist at UCLA and a very prolific author and mind researcher, he says in his book, The Developing Mind, that the child uses the mature circuits of the adult brain to regulate its own immature, unregulated circuits. So when the adults show up in a calm, loving way, that the child downloads that into his own nervous system, and then he grows up. He's not going to be an infant forever. At some point, he's going to be a mature adult who knows how to take care of themselves. That's a natural process. We don't have to teach kids to be independent. Independent is nature's agenda, because the parents are going to die. At some point, the mother bear is going to disappear. That bear cub has to be able to look after themselves in a mature, confident way. That's nature's natural agenda. What the mother bear needs to do is to meet the needs of that infant bear, so the infant bear can mature. So if we meet the child's needs, they're going to mature out of that helpless state with a sense of self-regulation and calm confidence in their own capacity. But when you don't pick kids up, what you teach them is that the world is not available, that they're alone, and that they're helpless. Talk about a formula for anxiety.
All makes sense when you look at it from this, right? And that's why I started the episode, and I think it's an important episode. I really do, because it gives us back our power. If we understand that, yes, can talk about genetics, but if we understand that it's really trauma that we've got to heal. It's really anxiety is something that we can manage and then get over. And we also, if we're parents or we're looking at how we can run businesses, we're still dealing with, everyone's got trauma, right? Everyone's got trauma. So your team's got trauma. How do we manage them? Well, we have to learn to communicate on a higher level or a different level or through a different learning modality. And so all of this combined leads us to be, well, badasses, like I said before. But I love this episode. I think it's epic. You probably want to share it with a few people. I'd advise it because it might really help them. Speaking of helping, we're at the end of episode 385. Yeah, 15 more to go to that big 400. Pumped about that. What? Well, what else? Well, if you want to double your closing percentage in 180 days or less, then you probably want to chat. Yeah, we probably want to chat. You know what I mean? We probably want to make it happen. If you're in real estate, insurance, if you are in any type of entrepreneurship and doing sales, of course you are, right? Then we want to be able to double that. And I'm here for you with the Unfair Advantage Academy. It's badass, right? We're going to do it through NLP. We're going to do it through neuroscience. We're going to do it through biohacking. We're going to do it through my 20 years of experience working with the best in the world. And I want to give you all the tools to make you into somebody that you always wish you could and hit that next level. Sound good? Unfairadvantage.online. That's it. That's it. Boom. Away we go. Or just head over to andymurphy.online and get onto my list, and I'll let you know when everything's kicking ass. But you can go there right now. Sign up, grab your free gift, the Mind Hack Pack. Yes, you go and find out what the Mind Hack Pack is. It's worth $99, and you also get a chance to get a $4,000 training system just by signing up to see what it's all about. Sound good? Of course it sounds good. Of course it sounds good. Until the next time, you have an amazing week. Hit those show notes up. And, oh yeah, one more thing. Why don't you smile for me?
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode of the Mindset by Design podcast with your host and NLP expert, Andy Murphy. We'll catch you next time.